Actually other businesses are taking and just try and get as much from them as you can, so at least you've got to start.
I would expect to see a good return on any new capital that's put into the business and a good plan behind it to explain how they're going to achieve that.
You would expect to see the last 3 financial years' accounts if the company's been in existence for that long. You would also want to see a budget and cash flow.
Well, I certainly would like to see a high-level plan of the revenue streams, profit levels, margins, product pricing, those sort of contents in a plan.
Well, a few ideas there. The financial information contained in the business plan needs to be more than a regurgitation of the management or financial accounts and must be carefully tailored to fit in with its objectives. Typically, it should include a sales forecast, a cash flow forecast, a profit forecast, a break-even calculation, a projected balance sheet if appropriate, the assumptions made in preparing the forecasts, and past accounts if applicable. Sales and revenue forecasts are obviously the key components of the financial forecasting model. Projections for both price and volume will use traditional budgeting techniques and must link back to the issues covered in the narrative sections of the plan. Also, the assumptions used, if not self-explanatory, should be included in supporting schedules. There are a number of obvious uses for the financial projections, such as producing a budget, anticipating future cash flows, and obtaining finance. But they also have other uses in business. And Stephanie, perhaps you could explain what some of those uses might be.
Well, the great thing about a forecast is that it hasn't happened yet, which means that you can see what risks there are. And you can also see whether the plan is actually serving the objectives that you've set. And this is particularly useful if you're looking at a new venture, or if you're deciding whether to do something different, maybe invest in new machinery or something on those lines.
And what sort of time period should the forecast cover?
Well, normally a year is a minimum. People do forecast for longer, especially if they're looking for longer term finance. But let's face it, if you're forecasting 5 years ahead, we don't really know what's going to happen. And so with the best will in the world, however well you do your research, you won't be able to be accurate beyond a year, really. So generally people don't do such detailed forecasts after the first 12 months. It could be quarterly or annually.
As with a budget, once the sales forecasts have been established, the related direct costs of sales can be derived. Overheads can be harder to estimate, but past experience and details such as competitor information and quotations can provide a useful starting point, particularly for new ventures. Capital expenditure will also need estimating, as will any financing costs. Now, many business plans are put together solely for the purpose of raising finance. What should the plan be doing to take account of that?
Obviously you have to make assumptions that you're going to get the finance, because if you don't, then the business plan won't work as it's set out. So we do have to make assumptions about finance. We'd need to find out what kind of terms could be offered, and if there were some fairly big variations in terms, maybe on interest rates, that could be included as a note in the same way that you would do for sensitivity analysis.
Mm-hmm. Now, producing cash flow forecasts is something that many of our viewers will be familiar with. Are there any specific risks here?
I think one thing to bear in mind is that people will often say that they're going to be pessimistic with their forecasts and therefore they're going to downgrade their sales. But then they are sometimes exposed to over-trading, meaning that they can't service the sales they have. Because if your sales are increased, then your working capital requirements are higher, your cash requirement is higher. So probably you need to avoid being purely pessimistic. Perhaps if you want to be one way or the other, perhaps go both ways. Do a forecast which you think will happen and then go over and under and see what the effects are of the variations.
Right. Well, once the core financial information has been collated, it may be necessary to include supporting schedules to clarify or expand on the data. These can include a more detailed analysis of the revenue and expenditure items and can also include a sensitivity analysis that tests the effects of changes in the assumptions used. Factors that may be particularly susceptible to change are exchange rates, credit periods, completion dates for projects, or product development deadlines. In addition to these analyses, the supplementary schedules can include corresponding balance sheets, as well as the profit and cash flow projections. Now, of course, everything we've talked about is easier said than done. Is there such a thing as an ideal business plan?
Well, I think ideally the business plan should be very, very clear. And if you can get somebody else to read the plan through, that can often be helpful. You definitely want an executive summary and a contents page and everything cross-referenced and self-matching in a sense. You know, your financial forecasts, as you said, have got to correspond with the narrative. Don't pad it out. Probably between about 10 to 20 pages, excluding appendices, but you can't really say, to be honest, how long it should be.
Right, and what about using, say, software packages to help you with this? What's your view of those?
Well, there are a lot of packages available. There are actually 2 packages produced by banks which are free, so by all means get those and have a look at them. They'll provide a structure and remind you of all the points that need to be covered in the plan. The financials are quite simple on those packages. The other packages you could get tend to divide into the marketing-based ones with a lot of sales analysis and the financial-based ones which are purely financial forecasts. There are some very good ones which will help you with the nuts and bolts, the number crunching. But if you're doing a simple forecast, perhaps for a service business, you can obviously make do with a spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. And finally, the business manager will often have to present the plan to potential backers or financiers or whatever. What tips can you offer on this?
Well, be sure that if you're presenting a plan that somebody else has produced, that you really are 100% familiar with it, because the person who's talking to you will want to assess your credibility, and they'll want to know that you really understand the business and the plan. And that's at least 50% of what they're doing when you're sitting there. They're not just looking at a plan that's been written out. So the worst thing is that you say, well, my accountant produced that, and what does that mean, Bob? You know, so you really do have to be very careful about that.
But I guess the great thing about the drawing up a business plan in the end is it does make you sit down and concentrate on the issues that are facing you.
That's right, exactly, yes.
Stephanie, thanks very much for joining us. Well, as we've heard, proper business planning can be essential to running a successful business, and hopefully this programme has given you an idea of just what needs to go into an effective plan. That's all we have time for now. There's more information from Stephanie in the study pack, but for now, goodbye.